In the treacherous gilded cage of imperial Rome, power was absolute, and danger was the only constant. Yet no figure embodies that lethal cocktail quite like Valeria Messalina. She was not born to the throne, but she was born to the dynasty, one of the famous Julio Claudians whose history was already one of madness, incest, and murder. She was not a warrior or a general, but a woman whose influence stretched a blood-soaked reign of terror across the greatest empire the world had ever known. Her name has been permanently etched into history, synonymous with corruption, cruelty, and a level of scandalous defiance that shocked even the jaded elite of Rome. This is why her story is so compelling. It is the story of a woman who dared to make herself a legend, even if that legend was a curse. The true account of a woman who clawed her way to the highest peak of power, and dared the entire Roman world to drag her down. Messalina was born into the very heart of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Her husband, Tiberius Claudius, was perhaps the dynasty's most ridiculed member. Old, limping, and prone to stammering, he was a lifelong academic written off by his own family as an embarrassment. He was seen as a safe joke, harmlessly obsessed with history, overlooked for all the great offices of state. Messalina's family viewed her marriage to him as simply a good dynastic match, not a path to ultimate power. Then in 41 AD, fate intervened with a dagger. The mad Emperor Caligula was murdered. In the ensuing chaos, Claudius, hiding behind a curtain fearing for his life, was dragged out by the Praetorian Guard and astonishingly proclaimed the new emperor. The historian Suetonius recounts how the bewildered Claudius was hustled to the Praetorian camp, where he literally bought the loyalty of the imperial guard. Rome was stunned. Overnight, Valeria Messalina was no longer just a noblewoman. She was Augusta, Empress of Rome. And she moved to seize control with a speed and ruthlessness no one had anticipated. Her agenda was singular: to consolidate power around her son Britannicus and crush any political threat before it could even whisper. The Emperor Claudius was easily influenced. To run the empire, he relied heavily on a handful of powerful, trusted Greek freedmen, former slaves like Narcissus, Pallas, and Callistus. These men were the true engines of the Roman state, handling vast correspondence, finance, and imperial decrees. They were the perfect intermediaries for an ambitious empress who could not be seen to wield political power openly. Messalina quickly formed an alliance with this powerful inner circle. It was a trade. Their administrative control in exchange for her direct access to the emperor's ear. Through these channels, Messalina began to orchestrate the removal of Rome's most prominent figures. It was a highly effective system of political assassination by decree. The true crime was often not treason but wealth, influence, or possessing something the empress desired. When Senator Appius Silanus was marked for death, she claimed to have dreamed he had assassinated Claudius, forcing the paranoid emperor to order the execution. By using fabricated threats, she was constantly clearing the field. The result was a court consumed by fear, and an empress who ruled by fearful loyalty and the constant threat of execution. But this ruthless power play was merely the beginning. Messalina's appetite for control, and her disregard for imperial law, was about to lead her down a path that would make her the most notorious woman in history. With the foundations of her power secured, Messalina turned her attention to the truly dangerous, those too independent, too wealthy, or too popular to ignore. Her ambition was now a consuming fire. The execution of Decimus Valerius Asiaticus serves as the perfect example of her ruthless ambition. Asiaticus was a respected twice-serving consul who had distinguished himself in the conquest of Britain. He was seen as a safe joke, harmlessly obsessed with history. His crime? Not treason, but wealth. Specifically, he owned the magnificent gardens of Lucullus, an estate Messalina desperately coveted for its beauty and prestige. The formal charge was treason. Asiaticus understood the game. Recognizing his fate was sealed, he was given the rare privilege of choosing his own method of death. This wasn't merely murder. It was a political lesson. Messalina was broadcasting a clear message to Rome's elite. Nothing is sacred and no one is safe from the Empress's desire. She even engineered the removal of her own imperial relatives, eliminating any woman who might one day stand in the way of her son, Britannicus. The exiled Julia Livilla, Claudius's niece, was a quiet, constant reminder of other royal bloodlines. Messalina did not tolerate rivals, however passive. The system was airtight. If the emperor would not sign the order, she used the fear of her network to ensure it was carried out. The machinery of the imperial court became her personal death squad. Rome was no longer ruled by the Senate or the emperor, but by the capricious will of a young empress operating through a terrifying apparatus of intimidation. But such absolute power rarely exists without an equally absolute cost. And Messalina was about to pay hers in the currency of scandal and reputation. To her enemies, Messalina's greatest flaw was her total disdain for the modesty expected of a Roman noblewoman. To them, she didn't just break the rules. She destroyed the very concept of decency. Whispers circulated that she would leave the palace in disguise, seeking not just liaisons, but a reckless form of public, defiant anonymity that brought her into contact with the lowest elements of Rome. For the elite, this was not just immorality. It was a deep, unforgivable offense against the Roman state itself, against the dignity of the imperial house. This wasn't just personal vice. This was a political time bomb. Her activities were a constant source of blackmail and humiliation for the powerful men she compromised. One particularly vicious and widely reported rumor, passed down by the historian Pliny the Elder, suggests she once engaged in a public contest with a notorious professional, challenging the very limits of her own endurance. This alleged act, regardless of its truth, instantly transformed her image. She was no longer just the Empress. She was a public spectacle, a deliberate stain on the imperial family's honor. The Roman elite could tolerate cruelty, but they could not tolerate this kind of reckless humiliation. She was giving her enemies a weapon forged in scandal, a weapon that could be used to separate her from her only shield, Emperor Claudius. The most dangerous rumor of all, however, was not about her appetite, but her ambition. She was growing tired of the elderly, easily manipulated Claudius. Her eyes had fallen upon a younger, bolder man, the handsome consul designate, Gaius Silius. Silius was charismatic, driven, and, critically, unattached enough to be installed as a potential ruler. This was not a flirtation. It was a blueprint for regime change. For Messalina, this was the final fatal gamble. To take Silius as a public paramour was one thing. To risk marrying him with the emperor still alive was an act of open, staggering treason. The chess pieces were set. The court was terrified, and in the shadow of her reckless, self-made infamy, the conspirators moved to destroy her before she could destroy the entire empire. Messalina's arrogance had reached its zenith. While Emperor Claudius was performing sacred rites in the coastal town of Ostia, she launched the most audacious political gamble in imperial history. She forced her lover, Gaius Silius, to formally divorce his wife, and then in Rome itself, she participated in a public ceremony. Valeria Messalina married her lover. This was a defiant, ceremonial act, the ultimate proof that she viewed Claudius as a disposable figurehead. Silius was likely positioned to adopt Britannicus, securing the future while sidelining the current emperor. This was not merely adultery. It was an act of open treason, a blatant, calculated attempt to overthrow Claudius. The moment the news reached Ostia, the court erupted in panic. The emperor's most powerful freedman, Narcissus, realized the stakes were no longer just political, but a matter of his own survival. He knew that in any new regime, he would be the first to be purged. Messalina's death was now a necessity for his own life. Narcissus cornered the shocked Claudius and hammered home the threat. Messalina has taken a new husband, not as a lover, but as a pretender to the throne. Claudius was dazed, perhaps genuinely heartbroken, but Narcissus was relentless. He feared, rightly, that if the emperor returned to Rome, Messalina's famous influence and charm would persuade him to forgive her. In the face of crisis, the emperor was paralyzed by indecision, muttering only the words, "Am I still the emperor? Is Silius now my husband's name?" The true power of the palace was revealed. Narcissus, a former slave, seized command. He forged the emperor's signature on the necessary papers and ordered the arrest and swift execution of Gaius Silius and all known conspirators. The betrayal was complete. Silius met his end with a stoic courage, but Messalina was abandoned. Her power base evaporated in a single day. Messalina was found in the coveted gardens of Lucullus, the very estate she had murdered Asiaticus to possess. She was alone, save for her own distraught mother, Domitia Lepida, who had hurried to her side. Lepida understood the ancient Roman concept of honorable death. She begged her daughter, "Your life is over. Only an honorable end can save your name for your children." But the woman who had presided over a bloodbath in Rome found she did not possess the courage to save herself. He wept. He begged. She pleaded for a last chance to speak to Claudius, the man she had so cynically used. Before Claudius could soften or sober up, Narcissus sent a military tribune and a group of centurions to finish the job. There would be no reprieve. When the soldiers arrived, Messalina's despair turned to animal terror. She was forced to face the consequence of her own reign of cruelty. The centurion was merciless. Messalina was executed in the very gardens she had stolen. The reign of Rome's most scandalous empress had ended not with a bang of political revolution, but with a frightened whimper. When Claudius was told Messalina was dead, he reportedly showed no emotion, simply asking for more wine. The threat to his power, and to his life, had been surgically removed. The Senate immediately ordered the damnatio memoriae, the damnation of her memory. Her name was chiseled from public monuments, her statues pulled down. History sought to utterly erase her from every physical trace. Yet history failed. The attempts to erase Messalina only ensured her legacy would be preserved through the very scandal her enemies wished to bury. Valeria Messalina remains a cautionary tale of unchecked power. She was a woman who used her desire, her ruthlessness, and her sheer appetite for defiance as a force in the hypermale political arena of Rome. Her true tragedy was not her death, but her hubris. She provided her rivals with the perfect, undeniable excuse to destroy her, ensuring that the Empress of Scandal would forever remain Rome's most infamous ghost. The story of Valeria Messalina is not just about ancient Rome's cruelty, but about history's judgment. She paid the ultimate price for her ambition, but her scandal ensures her name will never truly be forgotten. If you were chilled by the audacity of this empress, you won't want to miss our next deep dive into history's most compelling figures. Click the bell, subscribe to Scarlet Historians, and let us know in the comments, which Roman empress do you think was the most dangerous?